Great. Well, thank you again for the invitation, and thank you everyone for being here this morning. I'm here to talk to you today about why and how to measure what matters in college access. So my name is Bill DeBaun. I am NCAN's Senior Director of Data and Strategic Initiatives. What does that mean? Functionally, pretty much anything with numbers usually crosses my desk. I do a little bit of everything at NCAN. I do some comms, some policy work. I help our members think through program evaluation and kind of program measurement. I've been with NCAN for 8 years, and I guess largely at this point, I think about myself as kind of the translator between research and data on one hand and kind of policy and practice on the other. It turns out that many people did not get into the college access space because they liked working with data. They got into the college access space because they like working with students. And so I try to be mindful of that and kind of find solutions and approaches that help to better serve students, more students, while using data. Put my email here. Please make use of it if you have any questions or I'm not clear about anything over the course of my presentation. Please do reach out. I'm always happy to chat. All right. So my goals for today. I want to keep your energy levels high about how good data inform good practice. Now, for a lot of people, data is a 4-letter word, and not the kind that I can say on a webinar. For me, it is a 4-letter word, and that word is good. I like data. I don't think it's something to be afraid of. I think it's something that can be really informative, and I hope that by the end of this presentation, you will feel the same way about that. I want to explore some big questions and concepts related to data with you today. Then I want to kind of get specific about NCAN's common measures and how they can be useful. And then I want to try to leave some time for Q&A at the end. If you don't know NCAN, just a quick thumbnail sketch, we are a member organization based in Washington, D.C. We have about 600 members across the country, all shapes and sizes, but they are united in kind of the common mission of closing post-secondary access and attainment gaps for students. So how do we do our work? We strengthen our members. We help to build them up by providing them with professional development, cutting-edge approaches, data, news from the field, just everything they need to know so that they can focus on their work and not get caught up on stuff on the periphery. We advocate for student-centered policy solutions at the federal and at the state levels to try to break down barriers for students. And then we try to grow the field by bringing in more stakeholders. We've had a real surge recently in K-12 district and school members, school counselors, and that's great. But we're always kind of looking at what are some other sectors and stakeholders that we can bring into the college access field, because it really does take a wide cross section to do this work effectively. We're doing this work because, as you all know, talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. These are first fall enrollment rates by high school category for the class of 2018. This is from the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center, and you can see the equity gaps here by school income and school demographics that are not surprising to you, I'm sure, but they are still dismaying to you. And that inequitable opportunity is especially true now in the age of COVID, even as we hopefully are getting back to some semblance of normalcy in this country and around the world. We can see that although the class of 2020's fall enrollment fell about 7% year over year, we saw much steeper declines in low income and high poverty high schools. So I know that we just met, and we're just getting to know each other. You're just getting to know me. So let me just put some baggage on the table for you all before I start, so you can kind of get a sense of who I am as like a data analyst, like a data person. So let me give you just real quick some things I don't like. I really don't like data for its own sake. The idea that we would just collect data and have it not go anywhere, it really bothers me. And I feel like sometimes when programs are not being intentional, not thinking through kind of how and why they're collecting and using data, this is where we wind up. And as well, we're doing it just to do it. And when you're doing that, you're not putting the data to work for you. You're taking time and energy away from students you could be serving. And so data for its own sake, I'm not about that. Kind of related, the idea that something would be nice to have in terms of data collection and data on hand, nice to have isn't actually nice to have. That's like data set, like bloat. That again is taking time and resources and energy to collect something that if you don't have a purpose for it, if you don't have a way to make that data purposeful, then it actually is a hindrance more than a help. This next one is really important, and I think it's a trap that I think sometimes like pure data people wind up thinking about, which is to say that I really don't like when people say that the only things that we can measure really matter. I don't believe that's true. I don't think that is true in general. I definitely don't think it's true for the college access field. We have a deeply interpersonal field. We are asking students and families to trust us, to believe in us, to heed our advice about some of the most consequential, expensive, personally significant decisions that they will make in their lives. And that trust, that relationship is extremely difficult to measure. It really matters. It is the bedrock of a lot of our programs. I would contend to you it is the bedrock of our field. And so there are a lot of things that we can measure that matter. There are a lot of things that matter that we cannot measure. And I just want to be mindful about that piece, right? I mean, I was thinking about this when I was making this deck. I was thinking about like, I have a 1-year-old daughter. Well, I have 2 kids. I have a 1-year-old daughter, and I was thinking about like, my daughter makes me like immeasurably happy. I think she makes me immeasurably happy, right? That really matters to me, right? And so, kind of scaling this out on like a field-wide piece, I just really. I'm going to talk a lot about indicators today, about things that we can measure. I just want you to know that I'm mindful that the entirety of our universe is not contained in what we can put numbers to. The fourth thing that I really don't like is, I understand why people say it, but it makes me antsy when people say they're not a data person. I think everyone can be a data person. I think it's a matter of degree. I think that we are using data in our daily lives more than ever. And I understand being uncomfortable with data. I understand feeling like you could be more fluent than maybe that you are. But my hope and what I've seen in NCAN members in my time here is that everyone is a data person at some point. And my goal, my mission, my hope is that we grow you into a more confident data person than maybe you are at this point. All right, so I did a fair amount of talking there. Now I'm going to open the floor. I have a series of big questions here, and I want to take just a couple of minutes and just get maybe like somewhere between 2 and 4 responses to these questions. Feel free to unmute yourself, to put it into the chat. Big question number 1, why do our programs do what they do? Why are we doing this work? Create life-changing opportunities for students young and old. Thank you. Thank you. Help students succeed. Great. Access to higher ed for underrepresented students. Absolutely. Great. To ensure students have a secondary plan, a financial means to access it. Excellent. We're seeing some convergence. We're hoping to increase social mobility through college. That's great. Close the gap in college matriculation for first-gen students. Okay, so we got some alignment. That's good. I mean, I suspected that we would get some alignment, but we have some. All right, so let me show you big question number 2. Thinking about why we're doing what we're doing, we know that what we do matters. I just talked to you about the value, why this kind of space matters, why it is so important for students and families. We know that what we do matters. how do we know that what we do is moving the needle on our goals? How do you think about that as a program? Find out what the needs are, paying attention to student outcomes. Okay, great. A relatively fewer responses on this big question. That's okay. That means that this presentation is well timed, because we're going to talk about this a little bit more. All right. Last big question for now. What are some of your gut reactions to the words data and measurement? You see those words show up on the screen. What's your are you recoiling? Are you nodding? Are you excited about doing some charts and graphs? What's the response to that? Okay. Data helps us measure impact, gives the targets to improve upon. Great. That is our friend. Yes, I agree with that. We got some laughing emoticons. That's good. Feel sciencey. Yeah. Necessary, numbers and non-number representations, talent and capacity to do the work. Is needed yet overemphasized. I think that is probably true in a lot of cases. Frustrated when you leave things out from the beginning. As in when you don't have the data that you need from the start. Is that what you mean?
Yes, when you should have set something up and didn't, and then you find that you need to measure it.
We got a lot of good responses, a lot of good gut reactions here to the data piece. Cringy, but needed to set goals. Okay. Yes, Elijah, I hear what you're saying. Totally get that. I have my own cringy moments with data too, and I know how that feels. My views on that have shifted over time. I'd like to hear more about that, Michelle, if you want to put that in the chat. I love charting progress and using data to create change. My gut reaction is fear. Okay, well, we're hopefully try to ameliorate that today for you, Rhonda. The direction. And Tom says it's somebody else's responsibility. The laughing emoticons. That's good. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for the answers to the big questions here. All right. So let me show you these two charts. So these are two common kind of inquiry-related processes. Like, how do we ask questions, and like, what is the process that we follow to get answers? Right. The one on the left, you surely remember from 8th grade science, if not earlier, scientific method, where we observe a phenomenon, we research it, we hypothesize what will happen if we do something, we test the hypothesis, we look at our data, we make conclusions from the data, and then we start the process all over again when we see new observation. The cycle on the right is what you may know as the PDSA cycle. When you hear people talk about continuous improvement, this is what they're talking about, right? Where you make a plan for an intervention in an education environment, you implement that plan, you study the effects, you act, then you act from there, and then you continue planning, right? And you get into this cycle improvement. I would contend to you that both of these cycles essentially boil down to ask better questions to get clearer answers, and then use clearer answers to ask better questions. And then we just keep going and going and going to refine what we are learning, what we are asking, what we are doing, and hopefully improving on every iteration going around this piece, right? So we are getting into this virtuous cycle of asking questions of the data, learning from the answers to those questions, and then continuing to ask more questions, right? All moving toward an end goal of student success, program success, community-wide success, right? I think every time we refine our questions, our data collection, our data analysis, so that we better understand clearly what's happening with students, what's happening with our programs, we are working toward improving the outcomes for students, programs, and community. Back to a big question here. When we talk about a program that is intentional, we talk about intentionality. What are we talking about? Do you ever think about your programs being intentional or not intentional? And what does that like harken to you in terms of ideas? I'll give it just another minute here. Communicating goals and objectives, good. Making and creating change, excellent. When I hear intentional, I think about including what is necessary versus what is nice in a program. That's great. Having a program designed and implemented to align with program goals and vision, great. Filling on the purpose and outcomes, great. I think that we are largely in alignment. Me, when I hear the word intentionality about programming, I think about having a plan. Do I have a plan that has goals and I know where I'm going, what I'm doing, and the actions that I'm taking are moving me in a specific direction with purpose? And so I imagine some of you on here have heard about logic modeling. If not, logic modeling is to me is a fun activity, not fun for everyone, but to me, logic models are a roadmap for programs. They are a blueprint, a schematic, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. This is a very basic logic model here for small college access program. And so what we have in this logic model is we have our inputs. What are the resources that we have to do our programming? So in this case, we have staff, we have community mentors, we have funding, very important. We have access to space in schools to do programming. We have our curriculum, and we have a partnership with a transportation company. So the activities of this program, executes on they do monthly mentor and mentee meetings. There's a weekly after-school drop-in center for college advising. They coordinate campus visits for students. This program coordinates FAFSA nights for FAFSA completion. Okay, so the outputs, the direct products or results of these activities are, how many FAFSAs do the FAFSA nights yield? Not attendance on FAFSA night. That's a different kind of question. But how many FAFSAs got completed as a result of the FAFSA night? How many campus visits got coordinated? And how many students attended them? What percent of students went on more than 3 campus visits, setting that as a benchmark? What percent of students participating in the program completed college applications? Which is kind of a logical next step output from having the drop-in center for college advising. And then, some kind of measure of mentor-mentee satisfaction. And then ultimately, what all of this is driving toward are our outcomes, which are increased college enrollment, persistence, and attainment rates for students from the served high schools for this program. And big picture, improving community ties by retaining mentors for high school students, keeping community members involved in college access, in college advising, in kind of interpersonal mentoring by ensuring that we're recruiting and retaining mentors. So to me, you can look at this logic model and you can see what the roadmap is. You just looking at this very basic sketch, you have a pretty good sense of what this program does and how it measures what it does and what it's working toward in the big picture. Now, what I want to contend to you is that too many programs stop on the activities column. They are doing things like attendance on, for weekly drop-in centers. They're counting campus visits, but maybe not necessarily attendance. They're counting attendance at FAFSA nights. They're counting the number of mentor and mentee relationships they have, but they're not measuring the. I don't really want to use the word quality here because I think that's unfair. They're not measuring the results of those relationships, right? In terms of satisfaction, in terms of retention, in terms of duration of those relationships. And so I think too many programs are stopping on the activities piece without connecting those activities to what they plausibly produce. And the reason that the production, like the outputs here, are important is because I think that's what we can most plausibly tie to eventual enrollment, persistence, completion, workforce outcomes, right? If we're talking about things leading to enrollment, persistence, completion, we are better off looking at our outputs than we are tracking purely attendance on things and activities. I've seen this programs across the country in 4 years, you know. Now I think the tricky piece here is, okay, if you're going to come along with me on this journey and say, okay, I buy into, outputs are important, but I think the question is like, okay, well, which output should I be measuring? Like, where is the juice worth the squeeze on the outputs that I measure and the activities that lead to them, right? This is a big question number 5. How do we choose the activities and outputs we want to be intentional about pursuing and achieving? I'm going to keep going because I want to be mindful of time. I want to try to get some Q&A at the end. And so what I would say my answer for big question number 5 here is, well, which are the activities and outputs that are moving the needle? Those are the ones that we should pursue, right? And so this brings me to NCAN's common measures. And so NCAN's common measures are a set of college access success indicators. And I'm going to talk to you about the genesis in 1 second, but let me do a quick sidebar about glossary. When I talk to you about the common measures here, if I talk about KPIs or metrics or measures or indicators, I'm talking about exactly the same thing, just total synonyms. And sometimes I switch in between them without like thinking about it. If you hear any of these words come out of my mouth today, I'm absolutely talking about the same thing. NCAN's common measures. Before I came to NCAN, we started getting a push from members about measurement, about how do we measure the impact of what we're doing? How do we know that we're moving the needle for students? And so NCAN convened a number of members, did a deep lit review, and tried to find, okay, what are the measures that NCAN members are using and that they believe in, that they believe move the needle? And then which of those measures are the ones that literature, that research, that high quality research tells us are also connected to enrollment, persistence, and completion? And the middle of that Venn diagram, the member-backed, or I guess, yes, member-backed and research-backed circles, whatever was in the middle, that wound up being our set of common measures. So I'm going to show you what the essential ones are in a second. But we divide these kind of like indicators, these measures into access indicators. So anything that's associated with post-secondary enrollment that leads to post-secondary enrollment, and success indicators, anything that is associated with post-secondary completion. Now, time is finite in programs, totally understand that. And so we also divided these measures into essential and if available, right? Some programs have different program models. Depending on your program model, you may pull in some of the if available indicators, right? Because those are the activities that you are well suited to doing, that you can get funding for, that you have capacity and the personnel to execute on, right? But all else being equal, the essential ones are the ones where I think there's more juice for the squeeze, I guess, is to continue my analogy there. And so again, these are largely outputs and outcomes. This is not, as our members told us, back when we were developing this is not about head counts. This is about the products of the activities that we're doing. These are what we think about as the essential indicators. I'm not going to read this to you. I'll put the link to the full set in the chat. I don't think there's anything that's going to surprise you or shock you here among these things in terms of FAFSA completion, enrollment, high school GPA. These are program level indicators, right? I mean, you would want GPA for every student. Did a student take the ACT or the SAT? Did a student complete college admissions applications? But we have good kind of member feedback about these indicators, and we also have good research about them, right? And so a lot of the activities that programs are already doing, I think plausibly get connected to these measures. But I think the question is, are programs measuring these things, or are they measuring the activities that maybe lead to these things, right? Are programs stuck one step further ahead, like or one step, I'm thinking about like the direction out here. Are programs getting stuck on the activities versus the outputs piece? And so let me talk to you one second about just data collection. This is like a whole big topic. I'm happy to come back and talk about data collection. I'm not going to surprise you that my whole spiel is about putting data to work to help us ask better questions and find better answers. But if we don't have good data, then we will not get good answers and we will not improve our questions. And so it is worth thinking about whether and how you're collecting data for these things, how you're storing it, are you analyzing it consistently over time, so that when you're looking at FAFSA completion data year over year and you want to know, am I moving the needle on FAFSA completion percentages? You want to make sure that you're calculating that the same year over year, so you can get that longitudinal trend, right? And then you can ask yourself, if you're pretty sure that you collected the data the same way, you stored it the same way, you analyzed it the same way, then you see a shift in the trend. Well, if it's positive, well, what are the things that we think might have contributed to a bump there? If it declined, well, what are the things that we did differently that we shouldn't do, right? Or that, what plausibly led to that decline? But it's having that homogeneity of data collection that makes us pretty sure that we can look at a trend and say, okay, the data are the same, the outcome differed. Now we need to think about what practice kind of changed that outcome. All right, I'm in the home stretch here. So I think this is an important piece. I think this is going to be a separate conversation too. I'm harping a lot on enrollment, persistence, and completion. Those data are hard to find, right? Because you either have to track down students and ask them, or you have to go to the university, or you have to find another data source. And so the other data source that I want to talk to you about is called the National Student Clearinghouse. I imagine if you have NSC contracts, if not, here's kind of the thumbnail sketch. The NSC is a nonprofit that warehouses post-secondary enrollment data across the country, like 98% of post-secondary enrollments nationally. And they have a service where you submit a list of students to them. They match those students against their database. They return all the enrollment and completion data they have for that student to you. And then you can analyze that file. It's not a perfect system. There are mismatches sometimes. But in terms of time saved by tracking down individual students and getting that post-secondary enrollment data, it is a real lifesaver for the field, for districts and schools. Super, super useful on that front. And these are the kind of charts that they return, right? So they're analyzing, the student list that you're sending them, and they're sending you back information about post-secondary enrollments over time, and what kinds of institutions students were enrolling in. Sending you charts about what were the year-to-year kind of enrollment statuses of students in your list by class, right? So you can see well, when did my students stop out? And what year do I maybe need to partner with the success program and say, okay, I see between year 3 and year 4, I'm seeing a big stop out jump. Okay, so that tells you that maybe students need some extra support in that year 3-4 term, right? Sending you information about where are your students attending. I think that part is really key. The pipeline piece is super important, because if you're sending, I don't know, let me throw out the numbers. If you're sending 50% of your students to 3 institutions, but you're only getting a 20%, 25% second-year persistence rate, that tells you that, to me, that indicates that you should either be talking with students about going somewhere else, if there's another plausible option, or you should be going to the institution and saying, well, what is the deal here? Are there supports that our students aren't accessing on your campus that they should know about? Are they coming underprepared in some aspect of academics, or are they not adjusting well on campus, right? But knowing the pipeline and the outcomes of that pipeline, really important. And I think this is something else that the NSC helps to illuminate. This is what the student level report looks like. Okay, so this is every enrollment for every student that you send to them. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This takes a little bit of doing to flip around here, but this granular level of data is a really rich source of information. It gives you all kinds of insights about where students are going, how they're doing when they get there. Okay, my parting thoughts before I open up for Q&A. Rome was not built in a day, and your data collection capacity will not be either. It is always better to collect some data, to take stock of what you have, and to think about how you can improve it incrementally on the margin, than to say, I can't do it perfectly, I'm not going to do it. Right? There will always be more questions to answer in this field. You will always want to know more about some aspect of something that your students are doing, always. But that just because you want to answer additional questions doesn't mean that you should look past the questions that you can answer, that you do have in hand, right? I think there's a lot to say about connecting data to changing post-secondary advising practice and how you actually fit that data into a formative cycle. It's a big topic. I'm happy to come back. But I will say, just as a teaser on that, our advice at NCAN is to think about using this data to focus on the college going decision. Like, that is a big inflection point. Because there's so much variation in how students do when they get to institutions, where they decide to go really matters. It really has a big impact on their likelihood of completing. And we know that even within sector, even within institutional types, you get tremendous variation in completion rates. Even on the same campus, you can get tremendous variation in completion rates by students from different races and ethnicities, right? So I think it really is important to be using this data in a way that drives students toward their highest likelihood of completion.